The brass horseshoe nailed above the stable door was still hot to the touch when the first drop of rain hit it, sizzling like a lie. Cole Barclay had been polishing that same horseshoe every morning for 43 years. His wife Clara had nailed it there the week they moved onto this dusty stretch of Nevada land back in 1981, back when they had dreams of building something that would last. She said it was for luck, and for a long time, Cole believed her. But on this particular afternoon, August 14th, with the temperature hovering at 103 degrees and not a cloud in the sky just 30 minutes earlier, Cole wasn't thinking about luck. He was sitting in the tack room of his barn, working a rag over the worn leather of a saddle that had seen better days. The air was thick and heavy, the kind of stillness that makes your skin prickle even when you can't say why. Sweat dripped down the back of his neck, soaking into the collar of his faded plaid shirt. He heard the engine before he saw the dust. A car, coming fast down the long gravel road that led to his property. That alone was unusual. Folks didn't just show up at the Barclay Ranch. The nearest town, Winnemucca, was a good 45 minutes away, and his place sat at the end of a road that most people assumed led to nowhere. Cole set down the rag and walked to the barn entrance, his boots kicking up small puffs of dry dirt with each step. He squinted against the sun and watched a battered blue sedan bounce and rattle its way toward him. Steam was pouring from under the hood, a white cloud trailing behind the car like a signal flare. The sedan groaned to a stop about 20 feet from the barn. The driver's door opened and a young woman climbed out, her face flushed and worried. She couldn't have been more than 27, Cole figured. She had dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and wore a t-shirt that said Reno Public Library across the front. She looked at the smoking hood, then at Cole, then back at the hood, like she hoped one of them might offer a solution without her having to ask. Behind her, the back door opened slowly. A little boy climbed out, maybe 8 years old, with the same dark hair and wide brown eyes. He stayed close to the car, one hand gripping the door handle like he might need to jump back in at any moment. Cole walked toward them, not fast, but with purpose. That was his way. Slow and steady, like the Mustangs he used to train back when his hands could still grip a rope without aching. "Radiator," he said, nodding toward the steam. It wasn't a question. The woman nodded, her shoulders dropping slightly with relief that he'd spoken first. "I'm so sorry to just show up like this. My name is Maya." The temperature gauge started climbing about 10 miles back, and then, well. She gestured at the smoke. "I don't suppose there's a gas station nearby." Cole shook his head. "Nearest one's back in Winnemucca. You passed it." Maya's face fell. She pulled her phone from her back pocket, glanced at the screen, and let out a small sigh. No signal. Of course there was no signal. There was never signal out here, something the online maps had conveniently failed to mention before she'd left Reno that morning. "Can I use your phone?" she asked. "I just need to call a tow truck. My ex-husband is supposed to pick up Leo tomorrow morning, and if I'm not back." She trailed off, not finishing the thought. Cole studied her for a moment, then looked at the little boy, Leo, who was now staring at a cluster of sagebrush like it might be hiding aliens. The kid hadn't said a word since arriving. "You can try," Cole said slowly. "But the lines are probably down. They've been acting up all week." He didn't mention that the phone in his house was the same rotary model Clara had insisted on keeping, the one that sat on the kitchen counter like a museum piece. He didn't mention a lot of things these days. Maya nodded, trying to look hopeful. "Okay. Thank you. Really?" Cole gestured toward the barn. "You can pull her in there if you want. Get her out of the sun. Storm's coming." Maya looked up at the sky, then back at Cole, confusion crossing her face. The sky was still clear blue, the sun still blazing. "Storm?" Cole didn't answer. He just walked back toward the barn, assuming they would follow. Maya hesitated for only a second before ushering Leo toward the car. She pulled the sedan into the shade of the barn, and Cole watched as she climbed out with Leo, the boy now holding a small backpack with a cartoon dinosaur on it. The barn was cool and smelled of hay and horses and old wood. Dust motes floated in the strips of light coming through the gaps in the walls. Leo's eyes went wide as he took in the saddles, the tools, the piles of rope. He started to reach for a rusted plow blade leaning against a support beam. "Don't touch anything," Maya said quickly, her voice sharper than she probably intended. "We are leaving at first light." Leo pulled his hand back and stuffed it in his pocket, his face going blank in that way kids do when they're trying not to feel hurt. Cole watched the exchange from the corner of his eye while he filled a bucket with water from the barn's old spigot. He carried it to the sedan and lifted the hood, releasing another cloud of steam. The radiator was hissing like an angry cat. "You traveling far?" he asked, not looking up. "Reno," Maya said. "We were visiting my mother in Elko. She's been sick." She paused. "I should have left yesterday. But she was having a good day and I didn't want to." She stopped again, like the rest of the sentence was too heavy to carry. Cole nodded. He understood about good days. He understood about not wanting them to end. The first drop of rain hit the tin roof of the barn with a ping. Then another. Then what sounded like a dozen. Maya looked toward the open barn door and Cole followed her gaze. The sky had changed in the last few minutes, the blue swallowed by a greenish-yellow darkness that rolled across the desert like a wave. "What is that?" Maya whispered. Leo had moved closer to his mother, his small hand finding hers. Cole set down the rag he'd been using and walked to the barn entrance, his eyes on the horizon. The wind picked up suddenly, whipping dust into tiny cyclones across the yard. The horseshoe above the door, the one he'd polished that morning, seemed to hum with the vibration in the air. "Get back," Cole said quietly. Then louder, "Get back now." Maya grabbed Leo and pulled him toward the rear of the barn, toward the old stone horse stalls that had been there since Cole's grandfather first broke this land. Cole was right behind them, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. The sound came next. Not like a train, like the stories always said. It was deeper, more like the roar of 1,000 angry animals, and it was coming straight for them. Maya shoved Leo into the nearest stall and Cole threw himself across both of them just as the world outside the barn door turned completely black. The last thing he saw before the wind took everything was that brass horseshoe, spinning through the air like a leaf in a hurricane. And then there was only noise and darkness and the desperate prayer of a man who thought he'd forgotten how to pray. The world didn't end with a bang. It ended with the feeling of his ears trying to turn inside out. Cole Barclay had been through dust storms and blizzards and summers, so hot the cattle stood in lines at the watering hole like they were waiting for church to let out. But he had never felt anything like the pressure that grabbed hold of his head in that stone horse stall. It was like being underwater and flying through the air at the same time, and all he could do was press his body harder against Maya and Leo, his arms wrapped around the iron bars of the stall window like they were the last solid things on earth. The sound was everywhere and nowhere. A deep roaring that seemed to come from inside his own chest. His ears popped once, twice, 3 times, and then there was nothing but vibration, the kind you feel in your teeth when someone hits a heavy drum. Something sharp stung his cheek. Wood splinters, he realized later. At the time, it was just another sensation in a sea of them. His hands, the same hands that had braided ropes and fixed fences and held his wife when she took her last breath, were scrambling blindly. He felt denim, Maya's leg. He felt a small sneaker, Leo's foot. He grabbed and held on, because letting go wasn't an option his body would allow. The stone above him groaned. Not the stall itself, but something larger, something giving way. Cole tucked his head down and waited for the weight to fall. It never did. Instead, the heavy wooden door of the stall, the one his father had hung in 1963, the one with the iron latch Cole had oiled every spring for 6 decades, tore away from its hinges. Cole watched it lift into the darkness like it weighed nothing at all, spinning end over end until it vanished into the churning black. And right behind it, spinning just as fast, was the brass horseshoe. The one he'd touched that morning. The one Clara had nailed up 43 years ago. For one strange, floating moment, Cole saw it clearly. The tarnish he'd spent hours polishing was gone, scoured clean by the wind. It looked new. It looked like it did the day she'd handed it to him, smiling, saying this place was going to need all the luck it could get. Then it was gone, and Cole understood with absolute certainty that they were going to die. But understanding something and accepting it were two different things. Cole Barclay had never been good at acceptance. It was maybe his worst quality, depending on who you asked. Clara used to say he'd argue with the sun if it rose a minute late. So he didn't accept. He held on. Beneath him, Leo was crying. Cole couldn't hear it over the roar, but he could feel it, the small body shaking, the wetness seeping through his shirt where the boy's face was pressed against his chest. Maya had her arms wrapped around Leo's head, protecting him from the debris, and Cole realized she was doing the same thing he was. Holding on. Refusing. The storm had other plans. A new sound joined the roar, a high, screaming whistle that made Cole's teeth ache. He risked a glance up and saw the barn roof peeling back like the lid of a sardine can. 2x4s twisted in the air like ribbons. A hay bale exploded into a million pieces, straw flying horizontal, so fast it embedded itself in the wooden beam inches from Cole's head. He should have been afraid. He was afraid. But fear had become just another fact, like the blood he tasted from where he'd bitten his tongue, like the way his fingers were cramping from gripping the iron bars. And then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence was louder than the storm. Cole's ears rang with a high-pitched whine. He blinked, and blinked again, trying to understand what he was seeing. Light. Pale, dusty light, filtering down from above. He looked up and saw sky where the barn roof should be. Blue sky. Calm sky. Like nothing had happened. His body screamed when he tried to move. Every muscle had locked tight during the storm, and now they were protesting their release. He loosened his grip on the iron bars one finger at a time, his hands shaking so badly he could barely control them. Beneath him, Maya stirred. She lifted her head, her face pale and streaked with dirt. Her eyes were wide, searching, not quite focusing. "Leo," she croaked. "Leo." The boy moved. A small hand reached up and touched his mother's face. "I'm here, Mama." Maya collapsed back against Cole's chest for just a second, a single sob escaping before she caught it and pushed herself up. She looked at Cole, really looked at him for the first time since the storm hit. "You're bleeding," she said. Cole touched his cheek. His fingers came away red. "It's nothing." He pushed himself to his feet, his knees wobbling, and held out a hand to help Maya up. She took it, and he pulled her and Leo from the stone stall. Leo was coughing, deep chest coughs that sounded wrong, but he was standing. He was alive. The barn was a skeleton. The walls that remained leaned at strange angles. The roof was completely gone, scattered across Nevada probably. Sunlight streamed down on destruction. Saddles were mangled. Tools were twisted. The tractor Cole's grandfather had bought new in 1948 was on its side, one wheel spinning slowly in the breeze. Cole walked toward the open barn door, or where the barn door used to be. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. He stepped over debris and around broken beams, his eyes searching for something, he didn't know what. He found it. His truck. The 1995 Ford F-150 he'd bought the year Clara got sick, the one he'd kept running through sheer stubbornness and late nights with a wrench. It was wrapped around a mesquite tree 50 yards from where he'd parked it. The tree was still standing. The truck was not. Cole stared at it for a long moment. Then he turned, looking for Maya's sedan. It took him a minute to realize what he was seeing, or rather, what he wasn't seeing. There was a patch of flattened sagebrush where the car had been. A few pieces of twisted metal. A single hubcap, still spinning. But the car itself was gone. Vanished. Swept away like it had never existed. Behind him, Maya let out a sound. A small, broken noise that Cole felt in his own chest. "My car," she whispered. "Oh no. Oh no, no, no." She pulled out her phone. Dead. Of course it was dead. She looked at Cole, and for the first time, he saw real fear in her eyes. Not the fear of the storm. That was over. This was something else. "We need to call for help," she said. "We need to let someone know we are here. We need to get to the house," Cole interrupted. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Flat. See if it's still standing. Maya nodded, clutching Leo's hand. They followed Cole across the yard, picking their way through debris. The house came into view, and Cole felt something loosen in his chest. It was damaged. The porch was gone. Windows were blown out. But the structure stood. He led them to the front door, or where the front door used to be, and stepped inside. Dust and leaves covered everything. A picture lay shattered on the floor, him and Clara on their wedding day, 1979. He stepped over it without stopping. The phone was on the kitchen counter. The rotary dial Clara had loved. Cole picked up the receiver and held it to his ear. Nothing. Just silence. The lines were dead. He looked at Maya, standing in his destroyed kitchen, holding her son, her face a mixture of hope and terror. And in that moment, Cole Barclay understood something he hadn't fully grasped before. She wasn't just stranded. She wasn't just in trouble. She was trapped here. With him. In the middle of nowhere, with no way out, no way to call for help, and a storm that had taken everything except the three of them. He set the phone back in its cradle and met her eyes. "Phone's dead," he said quietly. "We are on our own." Maya sank onto a kitchen chair that was somehow still upright, pulling Leo onto her lap. She didn't cry. She just sat there, holding her son, staring at nothing. And Cole, who had spent 8 years alone since Clara passed, suddenly felt the weight of that silence in a whole new way. The night had been long and cold and filled with sounds that none of them could name. Cole Barclay woke on the floor of his own living room with his back screaming and his mouth tasting like dust. He'd given Maya and Leo the couch, the one piece of furniture that had survived the storm mostly intact. He'd taken the floor, using his old work jacket as a pillow and his stubbornness as a blanket. Morning light crept through the broken windows, painting stripes across the debris. Cole sat up slowly, his joints protesting every inch of movement. He was 71 years old, and right now he felt every single one of those years pressing down on his bones. Maya was already awake. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands wrapped around a mug that Cole recognized as Clara's favorite, the one with the little chip on the rim. She must have found it in the kitchen. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying anymore. "He's still sleeping," she said quietly, nodding toward Leo, who was curled into a small ball on the other end of the couch, his dinosaur backpack clutched to his chest like a teddy bear. "I didn't want to wake him." Cole nodded and pulled himself to his feet. Every muscle complained, but he ignored them. He'd had a lot of practice ignoring things his body tried to tell him. "I'll check the shed," he said. "See if there's anything we can use." The shed was a mess. The door hung by one hinge, and inside, everything was tossed around like a giant child had gotten bored. But Cole found what he was looking for buried under a pile of splintered wood, an old camp stove, the kind that ran on small propane canisters. He dug further and came up with 2 unbroken canisters, enough for a few days if they were careful. He carried them back to the house and found Maya in the kitchen, staring at the contents of his pantry. Canned beans, canned corn, a jar of pickles that had seen better days, a box of saltine crackers that was mostly crumbs. "There's a gas station in Winnemucca," Maya said, not turning around. 45 minutes away, you said. Someone there would have a phone. A radio. Something. Cole set the camp stove on the counter. 12 miles to the Johnson place. They've got a shortwave. Used to talk to my brother in Oregon sometimes before he passed. Maya turned, hope flickering in her eyes. 12 miles. You could walk that. Right. In a few hours. Cole looked down at his hands. They were shaking again. Not from fear this time. From exhaustion. From age. From the truth he didn't want to say out loud. Before he could answer, a cough came from the living room. Then another. Then a fit of coughing that went on too long, that sounded too wet, too deep. Maya was already moving. Cole followed. Leo was sitting up on the couch, his face flushed and damp. His eyes looked glassy, unfocused. He coughed again, a horrible rattling sound that made Cole's chest ache in sympathy. Maya knelt beside him, pressing her hand to his forehead. Her face went pale. "He's burning up." She grabbed her bag and started rifling through it, pulling out clothes, a water bottle, a half-eaten granola bar. Her hands were shaking. Finally, she found a small blue inhaler and held it up like a trophy. "Thank God," she breathed. She put it to Leo's mouth. "Come on, baby. Take a puff." Leo did. His breathing eased slightly, but only slightly. Maya listened to his chest, her ear pressed against his thin t-shirt, and when she sat up, her expression was worse than before. "It's empty," she whispered. "The inhaler. It's empty." Cole didn't understand. "So fill it. There's a pharmacy in." "There's no refill," Maya cut him off, her voice cracking. "This is an emergency inhaler. His real one is at home in Reno. I forgot to pack it. I thought we'd only be gone one night. I thought—" She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. Leo coughed again. That same horrible, rattling sound. Cole looked at the boy, then at Maya, then out the broken window at the endless Nevada desert stretching in every direction. 12 miles to the Johnson place. 12 miles of washed-out roads and debris fields, and who knew what else. He could make it. Maybe. If he started now. If he pushed hard. But if he left, and something happened to Leo while he was gone. If he stayed, and Leo got worse. The thought sat in his chest like a stone. Maya looked up at him, and for the first time since she'd arrived, the walls were completely down. She wasn't the worried mother trying to stay strong. She was a terrified young woman who had no idea what to do next. "Please," she said. Just that one word. "Please." Cole opened his mouth to tell her he'd go. That he'd walk those 12 miles and bring help and everything would be fine. That's what a good man would do. That's what Clara would have wanted him to do. But the words wouldn't come. Because standing in this damaged house, with this sick boy and this frightened mother, Cole Barclay saw something he'd been avoiding for 8 years. He saw himself. Not the strong rancher who'd built something from nothing. Not the devoted husband who'd held his wife's hand until the very end. He saw the man who'd let his daughter drive away 20 years ago after a fight about a boy, and never really tried to bring her back. He saw the man who'd gotten a Christmas card from his grandson every year and never once sent one in return. He saw the man who'd been waiting to die since Clara left, who'd let the world shrink until it was just him and his memories and a brass horseshoe he pretended was luck. Maya was still watching him, waiting for an answer. Leo coughed again, a small, broken sound. Cole turned away. He walked to the front door, or where the front door used to be, and looked out at the destruction. The empty hook by the door caught his eye. The one where the horseshoe had hung. It was just a nail now. Just a piece of metal holding nothing. He thought about luck. About how he'd always told himself he'd had a lucky life. Lucky to find Clara. Lucky to build this place. Lucky to have 43 years with her. But standing here now, with nothing but dust and silence and a sick child in his living room, he realized the truth. Luck had nothing to do with it. The life he'd built hadn't come from luck. It had come from stubbornness. From refusing to quit. From getting up every single day and doing the work, even when it was hard, even when he was tired, even when every bone in his body said stop. Clara hadn't loved him because he was lucky. She'd loved him because he never gave up. And somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten that. Somewhere after she died, he'd confused being alone with being done. He'd stopped getting up. He'd stopped doing the work. He'd just waited. Behind him, Leo coughed again. Maya was crying now, trying to hide it, trying to be strong for her son. Cole turned back. He looked at the boy on the couch, so small, so scared. He looked at Maya, so desperate, so alone. And for the first time in 8 years, Cole Barclay felt something other than tired. He felt angry. Not at the storm, not at Maya, not at the situation. At himself. For all the years he'd wasted. For all the people he'd pushed away. For sitting here, waiting to die, when there was still work to be done. The horseshoe was gone. The luck was a lie. But stubbornness. Stubbornness was real. Stubbornness was something you could hold on to. Stubbornness was something you could use. Cole walked back to the couch and knelt down in front of Leo, ignoring the way his knees popped and complained. He looked at the boy's flushed face, at the way his small chest heaved with each breath. "I ain't letting another one go," Cole said quietly. Maya looked at him, confused. "What?" Cole stood up. "Stay with him. Keep him calm. I'll be back." He walked to the kitchen and started gathering things. Rope, a canteen, a flashlight that still worked, his old cowboy hat, battered but intact. Maya appeared in the doorway, Leo in her arms. "You're leaving? You said you wouldn't let." "I'm not leaving," Cole said without stopping. "I'm going to the barn." "The barn is destroyed. There's nothing there." Cole grabbed a crowbar from a drawer and headed for the door. "There's one thing." Maya followed him outside, still holding Leo, who coughed weakly against a shoulder. "What are you talking about?" Cole didn't answer. He just walked toward the skeleton of the barn, toward the pile of debris that used to hold his life, with a crowbar in his hand and a fire in his chest that he thought had gone out years ago. The sun was directly overhead now, beating down on the destruction with the kind of fierce Nevada heat that could fry an egg on a rock if you had the patience to try. Cole Barclay ignored it the same way he ignored the screaming in his back and the bleeding from a fresh cut on his forearm where a jagged piece of metal had caught him. He was a man on a mission, and missions didn't stop for things like pain or heat or common sense. The barn was worse than he remembered. In the harsh midday light, it looked less like a building and more like a giant had stepped on it and then kicked the pieces around for fun. But Cole wasn't looking at the big picture. He was looking for something specific, and stubbornness was the only tool he had left. Maya stood at the edge of the debris with Leo in her arms. The boy's breathing was getting worse. Cole could hear it from 50 feet away, that wet, rattling sound that meant the dust and stress had triggered something serious. Maya's face was a mixture of confusion and desperation as she watched this old man dig through wreckage like a dog after a buried bone. "Cole," she called out. "What are you doing? He needs a doctor, not." "I know what he needs." Cole tossed aside a broken beam and kept digging. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes, mixing with the blood from the cut on his arm. He wiped his forehead with his sleeve and kept going. His hands found more debris, more nothing, more pieces of a life that didn't matter anymore. 20 years ago, he could have done this in 5 minutes. 20 years ago, he could have lifted beams that now took him 5 minutes to drag aside. 20 years ago, he wasn't 71 years old with arthritis in both hands and a knee that predicted rain better than any weatherman. But 20 years ago, he also wasn't fighting for something that actually mattered. Maya set Leo down on a relatively clear patch of ground and walked toward Cole. "Talk to me. Tell me what you're looking for. Maybe I can help." Cole paused, leaning on the crowbar, catching his breath. "Tractor. The old one. My grandfather bought it in 1948, and I'll be damned if I ever got rid of it." Maya looked around at the chaos. "The tractor? You're looking for a tractor?" "Cole, Leo can barely breathe. We need to get help, not." "The tractor has a fuel tank." Cole met her eyes, and something in his look made her stop. "Gasoline. We need gasoline." Maya's brow furrowed. "For what? The truck is destroyed. There's nothing to run." Cole straightened up, ignoring the protest from his lower back. "Signal fire. Wetwood won't burn worth a damn, but wetwood soaked in gasoline. That'll send up smoke they can see from 50 miles away. If we can get a fire going, someone will come. Someone always comes." Understanding dawned on Maya's face. Then hope. Then a new kind of fear. "But we need something to light it with. The matches in the house are all wet, I checked. And even if they weren't, we don't have enough gas to." Cole held up a hand, stopping her. "Go back to the house. Clara's dresser, top drawer. There's a small mirror. The kind with a handle, like she used to do her makeup with when we went into town. Bring it to me." Maya hesitated for just a second, then turned and ran toward the house, her shoes crunching over debris. Cole watched her go, then turned back to the pile and kept digging. 10 minutes later, he found it. The old Ford tractor, 1948 model, buried under a collapsed section of the barn roof. It was on its side, one wheel missing, rust covering every inch. But the fuel tank was intact. Cole said a silent thank you to whoever might be listening and got to work. By the time Maya returned, out of breath and holding Clara's small compact mirror, Cole had the siphoning hose from the tractor's maintenance kit. He'd bought that kit in 1985 and never used it once. Until today. "Did you find it?" Maya asked, holding up the mirror. Cole nodded and pointed at the tractor. "Fuel tank's good. Help me tip it." Together, they pushed and pulled and grunted until the tractor shifted just enough for Cole to reach the tank. He unscrewed the cap, fed the hose in, and started the ancient art of siphoning. One deep pull on the hose, a mouthful of gasoline he spat out immediately, and then the precious liquid was flowing into the glass jar he'd found in the wreckage. It wasn't much. Maybe a quart. But it was enough. Cole carried the jar to a clear spot near what used to be the corral. He gathered wood, rejecting anything that felt damp, searching for pieces that might have been sheltered enough to stay dry. Maya helped, dragging branches and broken beams, her face set in determined lines. Leo watched from where he sat, wrapped in Cole's old work jacket. His coughing fits came every few minutes now, each one worse than the last. Cole could see Maya stealing glances at her son, her hands trembling as she worked. When they had a decent pile, Cole arranged the wood carefully, leaving gaps for air, building it the way his father had taught him 60 years ago. Then he uncapped the jar and poured the gasoline over everything. The smell filled the air, sharp and chemical and promising. "Now what?" Maya asked. Cole held out his hand for the mirror. Maya gave it to him, and he examined it in the sunlight. Clara's mirror. She'd used it every Sunday before church, checking her hair, patting her cheeks. He could almost see her reflection in it now, smiling at him, telling him to stop being so serious. He pushed the thought away and focused on the task at hand. "We need the sun," he said, holding the mirror up and angling it toward the wood. "And a little bit of patience." The first few minutes produced nothing. Cole adjusted the angle, moving the mirror slowly, searching for that perfect spot where the reflected light would concentrate into heat. Maya stood behind him, silent, watching. Leo coughed. Then Cole saw it. A tiny wisp of smoke rising from a piece of dry bark at the base of the pile. His hand started shaking, but he held the mirror steady. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on." The smoke grew thicker. A small flame flickered, died, flickered again. Cole held his breath, willing it to catch. The flame grew, spread to a twig, then to a branch. Soon the whole pile was crackling, black smoke billowing into the blue Nevada sky. Maya let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She grabbed Cole's arm, squeezing tight. "You did it. You actually did it." Cole lowered the mirror, his arm aching, his heart pounding. He looked at the fire, at the smoke rising, at the hope returning to Maya's face. Then he looked at the mirror in his hand. Clara's mirror. The last piece of her morning routine, now blackened with soot from the fire. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. One of Clara's letters, the ones he'd kept in his nightstand for 8 years, reading them on lonely nights when the house felt too empty. He unfolded it, smoothed it on his leg, and fed it to the fire. Maya saw. Her face crumpled, understanding what that cost him. "Cole, you don't have to." "They're just words," Cole said quietly. She'd want them to be useful. He fed another letter to the flames. Then another. Each one felt like saying goodbye all over again, but different this time. Not losing her. Letting her go. Letting her be part of something that mattered. Leo coughed again, but weaker now. His small body was running out of strength. Cole looked at the sky, searching for any sign that the smoke was working. Nothing yet. Just endless blue. And then, faintly, a sound. So faint he thought he might be imagining it. But it grew, steady and rhythmic, coming from the west. Thwomp, Thwump. Thwump. Maya heard it too. Her head snapped toward the sound, her eyes wide. Is that? Cole nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The helicopter appeared over the ridge, small at first, then growing larger. It banked toward the smoke, toward the fire, toward them. Cole could see the red and white paint, the search and rescue markings on the side. Maya ran to Leo, scooping him up, pointing at the sky. Look, baby. Look. They are here. They are coming. Leo managed a weak smile, his eyes following the helicopter. Cole stood where he was, watching the aircraft circle lower, preparing to land. He was exhausted. He was bleeding. He was 71 years old and every bone in his body ached. But as the helicopter touched down in the field beyond the corral, as rescue workers jumped out and ran toward them, as Maya turned to him with tears streaming down her face and mouthed the words, "Thank you," Cole Barclay felt something he hadn't felt in 8 years. He felt alive. He looked down at Clara's mirror one last time, then slipped it into his pocket. She'd understand. She always did. The rescue workers reached them, asking questions, checking vitals, wrapping Leo in a blanket. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, turned to Cole. "Sir, are you injured? We need to check you out." Cole shook his head. "I'm fine. Take care of the boy." The woman looked at him for a long moment, then nodded and turned to help with Leo. Maya appeared at Cole's side, Leo now in the arms of a paramedic. She grabbed Cole's hand and held it tight. "You save him," she said, her voice breaking. "You saved my son." Cole looked at the helicopter, at the smoke still rising from the fire, at the strangers who had become something more in the past 24 hours. "Just returning the favor," he said quietly. Maya didn't understand, but she didn't need to. Cole understood. The storm had taken everything. But somewhere in the wreckage, it had given something back too. A reason to stop waiting. A reason to start living again. The paramedics were loading Leo into the helicopter. One of them called out to Maya, telling her to come, to climb aboard. She looked at Cole, her eyes asking a question she couldn't put into words. Cole nodded toward the helicopter. "Go. He needs you." "What about you?" she asked. "You're coming too, right?" Cole glanced back at his damaged house, his destroyed barn, his empty land. Then he looked at the helicopter, at the boy who'd called him Grandpa, at the young woman who'd crashed into his life and changed everything. "I'll be right behind you," he said. And for the first time in 8 years, he meant it. 3 weeks had passed since the helicopter lifted off from Cole Barclay's ranch, and the September air carried a softness that August never could. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the property, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Where destruction had once reigned, something new was taking shape. A FEMA trailer sat near what used to be the corral, its temporary nature a sharp contrast to the permanence of the land around it. Next to the trailer stood a new corral, smaller than the old one but sturdy, built with fresh lumber and honest sweat. Cole Barclay knelt by the corral fence, a hammer in his hand and a mouthful of nails between his lips. He was adding a final board, the last piece of a project that had taken him 2 weeks to complete. His movements were slower than they used to be, more deliberate, but there was purpose in every motion. The kind of purpose that comes from building something for someone other than yourself. From inside the trailer, a door slammed and footsteps came running. Cole didn't look up. He didn't need to. He'd come to recognize that particular rhythm over the past weeks. Small feet, in a hurry, always headed straight for him. "Cole, Cole, look what I made." Leo skidded to a stop beside him, holding up a piece of paper with both hands like it was the most precious thing in the world. His face was no longer flushed with fever. His eyes were bright and clear. The asthma attack had been scary, the doctors said, but thanks to quick action and the helicopter rescue, he was going to be just fine. Cole set down his hammer and took the paper. It was a crayon drawing, done with the kind of fierce concentration that only children possess. There was a house, square and brown. Next to it, a barn, red with a black X on the door. 3 figures stood in front, a tall one with grey scribbles on top, a medium one with a triangle dress, and a small one with enormous eyes. Above them all, a giant black swirl with red and orange flames shooting out, and emerging from the flames, a dragon breathing smoke. "What's this?" Cole asked, pointing at the swirl. "That's the storm," Leo said, leaning against Cole's knee. "And that's the dragon. He came out of the fire and saved us." Cole studied the drawing for a long moment. In Leo's mind, the smoke from their signal fire hadn't been just smoke. It had been a dragon, a protector, a creature of legend that had appeared when they needed it most. "That's some dragon," Cole said quietly. Leo nodded seriously. "He's a good dragon. I put you in the picture too, so you don't get lost." Cole felt something catch in his throat. He cleared it quickly, the way old men do when they don't want to admit they're feeling something. "Well, I appreciate that," he said. "Can't have me getting lost. Who'd finish this fence?" The trailer door opened again and Maya stepped out, 2 mugs in her hands. She'd been staying in Winnemucca at a small motel for the past 2 weeks, driving out every day to check on Cole, to help with the cleanup, to make sure he was okay. Last week, she'd made a decision. She'd called her ex-husband, arranged for Leo to stay an extra month, and moved them both into the FEMA trailer. "I'm not leaving you alone out here," she'd told Cole. "Not after everything. So you're just going to have to put up with us for a while." Cole had pretended to grumble about it. But every morning when he woke up and heard Leo's laughter from the trailer, he thanked whatever forces had brought that battered blue sedan down his road. Maya walked toward them now, handing Cole a mug of coffee. It was still strange to him, someone else making coffee in his kitchen. But it was a good strange. The kind of strange that might become normal if he let it. "What's that?" she asked, nodding at the drawing. Leo grabbed it and held it up for his mother to see. "It's us. And the storm. And the dragon." Maya looked at the drawing, then at Cole. Their eyes met over Leo's head, and something passed between them. Gratitude. Understanding. The kind of connection that forms when people survive something together. "That's beautiful, baby," Maya said, ruffling Leo's hair. "Can we hang it up?" Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and metal. A nail. Not a special nail, just a simple iron one from the hardware store in Winnemucca. He held it up. "Got just the spot," he said. He walked to the trailer door and found a place on the frame where the wood was soft enough to take a nail. With 3 firm taps of his hammer, he secured it in place. Then he took Leo's drawing and carefully pressed it onto the nail, making sure it was straight. The paper fluttered in the afternoon breeze, the cran dragon seeming to dance against the metal background. It wasn't a brass horseshoe. It wasn't lucky. But as Cole stood back and looked at it, he realized it was something better. It was real. It was here. It was now. Leo tugged on his sleeve. "Cole, can we go look for more rocks after? The shiny ones." Cole looked down at the boy, at his eager face and hopeful eyes. 8 years old, with a whole life ahead of him. A life that, for some strange reason, now included a grumpy old man in the Nevada desert. "Tell you what," Cole said. "We finish the fence, we have some lunch, and then we'll go rock hunting. Deal?" Leo's face split into a grin. "Deal." He ran off toward a pile of stones near the trailer, already searching for treasures. Maya watched him go, then turned to Cole. "You know," she said softly, "when I drove up here 3 weeks ago, I thought my life was falling apart. My car was dying, my son was scared, my ex was breathing down my neck. I thought I'd made the biggest mistake of my life, taking that road." Cole took a sip of his coffee and waited. "Turns out," Maya continued, "it was the best mistake I ever made." Cole nodded slowly, looking out at the land. His land. The land his grandfather had broken, his father had worked, and he had nearly let die. It looked different now. Not because anything had changed, but because he was seeing it through different eyes. Clara used to say, "He began, then stopped." The words were hard, even after all these weeks. She used to say that the best things in life are the ones you don't see coming. Maya smiled. She sounds like she was smart. She was. Cole looked at the drawing on the trailer door, at the dragon rising from flames. She also used to say that luck is just another word for paying attention, for being there when opportunity shows up. The afternoon stretched around them, peaceful and warm. In the distance, a hawk circled slowly, riding the thermal currents. The new corral stood straight and true, a small symbol of renewal in a landscape that had known so much loss. Leo came running back, his hands full of rocks. Look. This one has sparkles. And this one looks like a potato. And this one. He tripped over his own feet and went sprawling, rocks flying everywhere. For a moment, there was silence. Then Leo sat up, looked at his empty hands, and burst out laughing. Maya laughed too. And after a second, Cole joined them. The sound of it felt strange in his throat, rusty from disuse. But it also felt right. He walked over and helped Leo up, brushing the dust from his shirt. You okay there, partner? Leo nodded, still giggling. I dropped all the rocks. We'll find more, Cole said. There's always more rocks. They spent the rest of the afternoon walking the property, Leo darting ahead to examine every interesting stone, Maya and Cole following at a slower pace. They talked about small things, what to have for dinner, whether the new fence would hold, when Leo might start school in Winnemucca. Ordinary things. The kind of things Cole hadn't talked about with anyone in 8 years. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they made their way back to the trailer. Leo was tired, his steps slowing, his eyes drooping. Maya picked him up and carried him the last few yards. Cole stopped at the trailer door and looked at the drawing one more time. The crayon colors were already fading slightly in the sun. The paper had started to curl at the edges. It wouldn't last forever. But that was okay. Nothing did. The trick was appreciating it while it was there. He reached up and touched the edge of the paper, his rough fingers gentle against the child's artwork. Then he opened the trailer door and went inside. Dinner was simple, canned soup and crackers, the same thing they'd been eating for weeks. But it tasted different tonight. Better. Leo fell asleep at the table, his head dropping onto his arms mid-bite. Maya carried him to the small bedroom and tucked him in. When she came back, Cole was standing at the window, looking out at the darkening land. What are you thinking about? Maya asked. Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then, about how easy it is to forget. To let the world shrink until it's just you and your memories. And about how sometimes it takes a storm to remind you that you're still here. Still breathing. Still able to matter to someone. Maya came and stood beside him, looking out at the same darkness. I'm glad you remembered. Me too, Cole said. Later that night, long after Maya had gone to bed, Cole sat on the steps of the trailer. The stars were out now, millions of them, more than you could ever count. The same stars Clara used to look at with him, back when they were young and the future stretched out forever. He pulled Clara's mirror from his pocket. The one she'd used every Sunday. The one that had helped save a little boy's life. It was smudged now, marked by smoke and soot and the fingerprints of a desperate afternoon. But when Cole held it up to the starlight, he could still see his own reflection. An old man. A stubborn man. A man who had spent 8 years waiting to die and had finally remembered how to live. The trailer door creaked open behind him. Leo appeared, rubbing his eyes, a blanket dragging behind him. Couldn't sleep. Cole asked. Leo shook his head and climbed onto the step beside Cole, leaning against his arm. They sat together in silence, watching the stars. Cole. Leo said finally, his voice sleepy. Yeah. I'm glad we got lost. Cole looked down at the boy, at his tired face and trusting eyes. Then he looked back at the stars, at the endless Nevada sky, at the land that had been in his family for 3 generations. Me too, Leo, he said softly. Me too. The night wrapped around them like a blanket, peaceful and complete. And somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called to its pack, the sound carrying across the desert like a promise. Tomorrow there would be more work. More fences to build. more rocks to find, more life to live. But for now, there was just this: an old man and a young boy